Welcome back to another episode of Won't Be Silent. I have a great guest today, Moshe Levy, and he's visiting here in Los Angeles for a very important reason. So without any further ado, Moshe, tell us about your story.
Sure, thank you for having me, Abe. So my name is Moshe. I was born and raised in Israel, in Sderot, on the Israel-Gaza border. All my family still live there, but I live in New York at the moment. I came to LA to participate at the Milken Global Conference, not for business reasons, but because I am a family of a hostage who is still held captive in Gaza. My brother-in-law, Omri Miran, was taken on October the 7th, kidnapped from his home in front of my sister Lishay and the two baby daughters, Roni and Alma. Roni was 2 years old back then. Alma was only 6 months old.
Wow.
Um, Omri is still held hostage. It's day 580 since October the 7th, over 20 months. And I came here to speak with people from the private sector, from the public sector, entertainment, etc., in order to raise awareness, in order to recruit them to our advocacy efforts for the hostages, whether publicly or privately, and also speak in speaking engagements and opportunities during the conference and after it.
And here, thank you for being here to talk about this. We can't remind people enough about the hostages. I'm incensed that we have gone against everything that America has stood for, which is, we don't negotiate with terrorists when in fact that is all we're doing. And that is all we've done. And I can't imagine how difficult it must be for your sister and your family and just all the families that are suffering. So what kind of response did you get? Like, what do people want to do to help?
I think the responses were generally positive. People, first of all, need to hear and listen firsthand, whether from captivity survivors, whether from families of hostages, whether from survivors of October the 7th generally, so that they can relate to the human story. And then we try and call to action in our advocacy efforts, and people have different avenues to act, whether in their communities to share with their community about the story. For example, for Omri, a father of two beautiful daughters, a devoted husband, a shiatsu therapist, a gardener, a lover of sports, of nature, of literature, really a person you want to have a beer with, to laugh with. And I want people to relate with Omri so that when they speak about him, they don't speak about him as merely a hostage, as merely a poster of a 48 years old man who was taken and marked two birthdays in captivity already, but
Wow.
rather as a human being, a complete human being. And the call to action is to raise the phone, if your phone, if you to pick up the phone if you have contacts that are relevant in government or in on other avenues, the private sector, to invite families of hostages, captivity survivors to speak at your communities, at your workplace, and join us in rallies, in marches, in online advocacy. There are so many ways to help. But we need that help, especially, as I said, we're 20 months since October the 7th, 580 days. And the issue of the hostages is losing its priority, whether in Israel and, of course, worldwide. And so we need you so that Omri and 58 other hostages will not be forgotten. We need to save them, those who are alive, to be reunited with their families, and those who were murdered to be buried in the land of Israel.
I think it's so compelling that you want to remind everyone that the specifics of who your brother-in-law is, about the qualities of the kind of person he was, that he had two little kids. It's almost like I can relate to wanting to tell individual stories because so much of my family was wiped out in the Holocaust.
Mm.
My uncle specifically was killed. He was 30 years old, but he was the conductor of the Vilna Symphony Orchestra, and he
Wow.
never was able to go on to fulfill the career he'd already achieved, the youngest conductor of the Vilna, and because he was one of the 6 million anonymous Jews, I've made it my life's mission to tell his story. And we're working on a project to get him away from just being this number to the human being, to the musician, to that he wrote a song in a concentration camp that was found 75 years after his death. And it's important to tell individual stories. And I wish I could have everyone who wants to speak about it on this platform, because again, I have my own universe of it, but it's still, even if one person can make a difference in terms of adding to the number of people that need to support the hostages being freed. It's just shocking that the priorities of this country have been so turned into the most vapid nothingness. It's so hard to call myself an American this day and age because of what's going on with the hostages. So I commend you for trying to speak out. So I'll put in the show notes any website or anything that you want as a call to action, because I would like to know about it and I would like to share that. So there must be something we can do, because we need to turn the corner on this apathy towards the hostages and put them back in the main story. And unfortunately, our legacy media are a bunch of anti-Israel Semites. Like, it's just embarrassing to even pick up a newspaper in America these days, because they don't care. They'd rather platform the ones that are walking around with schmatas on their face, screaming for the end of Jews. It's wild.
Yeah, it's difficult to operate in this atmosphere, in this environment. And when I advocate here in the US, naturally my focus and the focus of all families, and we work under an NGO called the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which we set up as families on October the 8th in Israel, and then there are branches worldwide, including here in the US. We go to Congress, we go to the administration, try again to humanize the hostages so that when they make policy decisions, they have them in mind. But we also reach out to communities, the same, and the traditional media, in order to ensure that they don't forget that within all the toxic political discourse we find ourselves in, there are human beings who are suffering right now in tunnels or held captive by terrorists, tortured, starved, deprived of food, water, sanitation, sunlight, um, deprived of their humanity in many ways. And they need us, and they need our voice, because, as Jews, one of our principles is the redemption of our captives. And another principle of ours is the sanctification of life. And that's the mission we need to lead with when we counter our enemies who are sanctifying other things, such as death.
I mean, just the fact what you just said, one of the words you just used is something that has become so not relevant anymore, which is humanity. It's hard to find here in the States, which is why we can see that it's just playing out in the fact that they are still there. I just want to briefly, before we started taping, tell us that when you moved to America and that part of your story.
Yeah, so I moved to New York in September 23, a month before the attack. I lived in the US beforehand to go to graduate school and also college. And I moved
But
to New
you
York.
moved back to Israel, yes?
So college, I went back to Israel. I served in the military for 6 years. I was a captain in the IDF. And then I went to graduate school to Wharton, Philadelphia, graduated, traveled a bit, went back to Israel to be with family in the summer, and then left back to the US in September 23. I landed in September 7th, I think. And a month after, our entire life changed. I thought I'm starting a new chapter in life in New York, a new city, a new job. But my focus shifted naturally after October the 7th to advocacy for my family, for Omri, for my nieces who need a father. They are growing without their father, and they're speaking about him as an abstract, as a poster, as something
Yes.
that they may have had before. Roni still remembers Omri because she's 4 years old now, nearly 4 years old, but she vaguely remembers him. She vaguely remembers the concept of a father. Alma, who was 6 months old when he was kidnapped, doesn't even know Omri as a person, as a father beyond the poster. So I'm fighting for them. And I found myself on October the 7th here in New York, and it was such a difficult night. I remember I just entered a nightclub, Brooklyn Mirage, to hang out with friends, and then started receiving messages that there are rocket attacks. But I grew up to rockets. We normalized rockets, and that was a big mistake of us. We normalized that existence.
Really? Is that what
And
you, yeah. Wow.
And but after a few minutes, it was clear that these are not only rockets this time. It is a full-scale invasion, whether to my hometown Sderot, whether to the kibbutzim nearby, like Nahal Oz, where my sister Lishay and Omri lived, or near where my sister Michal and her husband Sagiv live. And I was shocked. I was helpless. Started receiving messages from friends as well who were living in kibbutzim in the area, uh, seeing the messages from members from my units who told me that the unit has been attacked because they were stationed on the Israel-Gaza border.
Wow.
So it was a tough night. I didn't sleep. I told my family to keep updating me every 15 minutes. But at some point, we lost contact with Lishay and Omri, and only 10 hours or so after we lost contact, we discovered that Omri was kidnapped. But we're grateful that Lishay and the girls survived and rescued. And that was that day and that night and day for me here in the US. And that's the start of my advocacy work for my sister and for Marie.
Wow. That's so intense. I mean, that's so much to live up to also, to kind of put yourself in the forefront of trying to, brave the world to make sure that your words are being heard and that your family gets saved. It's so unconscionable. I don't like comparing October 7th to the Holocaust. I don't always appreciate when that's kind of tossed around like that because we're not comparing apples to apples. But I'm taking a class at the Holocaust Museum now for storytelling to like also work on, this. I have so many different stories from my family that I'm trying to keep it straight. But when you go back to the history and you see what brought to that moment, it's just shocking that it just didn't stop before it became that. In the same way, when you say you normalized rockets, it's almost like these are teaching moments,
Yeah.
that we all have. And how do we act on now that we have this information, or what do we do to change things? But yeah, well, I'm happy to share your message with whoever will listen. And again, if there's any other message that you want to speak to at this particular moment that you want to make sure you drive any point home, I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah, I will say that we're in crucial weeks. And it's difficult for me to say, but after 20 months, the past few weeks were very frustrating and difficult for us families of hostages of all different backgrounds and political kind of opinions. Where government officials, Israeli government officials, simply stated the hostages are no longer our primary objective in this war. Yesterday, the IDF released the command it received from the government on the upcoming operation in Gaza. The hostages were ranked 6 in the list of priorities. This is for us a moment of breach of trust. We were told for so many months by government officials that the hostages are number one, that we are
Right.
fighting for them, fighting to bring them home, because people like Omri were left behind that day. They were not protected by the state institutions that were supposed to protect them that day. Many of them were civilians, not active combatants, taken from their home, taken from a party, taken from the fields, as well as soldiers who were not equipped to deal with a full-scale invasion because of lack of foresight by their commanders and the
Mhm.
high echelons in the IDF and other security apparatus bodies. But now at this moment, we need to understand either we're going full on bringing home the hostages and then dealing with the security challenges we have to deal with, the higher ones, including Iran, and the lower priority ones, which are a much weakened Hamas after it was weakened by the IDF operations in Gaza. But at this moment, if we want the hostages alive, those who are still alive, if we don't want to lose the bodies of those who were murdered, we really need to focus on finding a solution to bring them. And that solution is only through a deal. And it's supported by the majority of the Israeli public, according to every poll, about
Of course,
70%.
it's not. It's like, hello. The only people that don't want them to be as the priority are the ones that are avoiding some kind of challenge for being so incompetent on October 7th. And we haven't been allowed to really say that, and everyone's dancing around, oh, Bibi, and let's not say, we're not in charge, we don't know, we're not in that position. It doesn't matter. The proof is in the pudding. You're number 6 on the list.
Yeah, I'm
And
not
as
willing
I
to
see
dance
it,
around it
anyone else
anymore,
that
like
has
you
anything
said.
else to say about it can fucking take a powder.
Yeah. And I think with the current administration in the US, we can get a lot of security guarantees in order to ensure that any deal we strike will be a deal that we can eventually implement and also have the exit options in case our enemies are violating it. And those are the guarantees we need. I am meeting the American and many other families, meeting the American administration and Congress quite often. And
Good.
we understand from them that they're fully backing Israel. They're fully backing the idea of prioritizing the hostages and fully backing the idea that if Hamas violates a deal to release all the hostages, there will be dire consequences. But we need to try, we need to bring them home and then deal with the medium and long-term security challenges.
I mean, maybe if you just get a commitment that you're not going to throw Bibi in jail for his crimes with him and his wife,
Sure,
maybe
it can
that's what
take
needs
it.
to be heard. Because no one's saying that.
Yeah.
Everyone's dancing around that. They're dancing around the fact that what he's being accused of is keeping the war going to protect
Hmm.
himself, and that maybe just give him a pass. Period.
Yeah, I want to believe that he has the right motives in mind. That and I acknowledge the fact it's a complex situation. Nobody should
Mm-hmm.
deny that. And Israel is in a position it shouldn't be. The world should have stood on October the 8th on the borders of Gaza and demand Hamas to release all the hostages unconditionally, or else the entire world will join Israel in its fight to bring home the hostages. The world has forsaken us in many ways, and Hamas has been emboldened by nefarious actors, by sponsors that it has like Iran, Qatar, Turkey, emboldened by even demonstrators across the Western world who are not demonstrating for peace. They're
No,
demonstrating for
they're
the
called
eradication
idiots.
of Israel.
They're called idiots here in America.
Yeah.
So just
Um,
to be clear.
But I think many different kind of bodies and agencies and states embolden Hamas. But I put that aside because I can't convince Iran to push Hamas to release all the hostages. What I can do is pressure my own elected officials to fulfill what they promised to us
Right.
during the first week or so of the war, which is prioritizing the hostages no matter what. And what they promised to me when I served in the military, what they promised to every Israeli citizen, and I'm not talking about this government, I'm generally talking about the Israeli ethos, the Israeli social contract, which is never leaving anybody behind and always doing everything we can to redeem our captives who were taken unjustly by our enemies. So that's my expectation, that's my push, that's my message. Support the families of hostages in our call for a deal to bring home the hostages and a deal that will also allow us to tackle the long-term security challenges in the Middle East.
Right. Well, I appreciate your words and the work you're doing, and I am crushed that your family has to live through and what our fellow Jews are currently kind of being, they're trying to victimize us, but we're sick of being victims and we won't
We're not,
ever
yeah.
be victimized again. And, you know, just, I always say, because my parents were Holocaust survivors, innately, I have a spine of steel. So I've been called to show up. Actually, I was called to show up when the Nazis were marching in Charlottesville back in 2017. That was my awakening, you know. But and I was just, before you came here today, I'm working on writing a piece called "Was Superman Jewish?" Because all the superheroes that we're very kind of schooled with in America were all written by Jews: Batman, Superman, you know. So there is that innate sense that we're storytellers, but it's about, we show our, we're heroes. And my dad, who was with the Bricha, was a superhero. These are the unsung Jewish heroes that nobody knows about, that hopefully I get a chance to tell his story, right? As are you telling your
And I hope I'll be able to bring Omri to your platform
Oh,
when
that
he's
would
back,
be
because
heaven.
he's a hero. My sister is a
Definitely.
hero, and I can't wait to see them reuniting.
Mm.
Um, their love is something I haven't seen, and they met in March 2020 amid the pandemic, fell in love.
Oh, really? I love that
Um,
story.
Brought to this world two beautiful daughters, built a home in Nahal Oz, Kibbutz Nahal Oz. And the last thing my sister told Omri is she loves him. She'll take care of the girls. And she asked him, don't be the hero you are. I need you to be a different, meaning I need you to be a different kind of hero. I
Right.
need you to go alive and return to me alive and return to Roni and Alma alive. And I'm going to keep manifesting that he'll return
Yeah.
alive to us and we'll be able to rehabilitate together as one family. And I can't wait to see Roni and Alma run to him when he returns, hug him, tell him, Daddy, you're finally home.
Oh, that would be just, I look forward to hearing that from you as well. Well, look, keep on your journey. It's an important thing you're doing. You know, again, you've been called for the bigger reason to why you're here on earth, to platform who you are and how you're showing up. And you're a hero too. And don't you forget that.
Thank you.
All right, be well.